Hello, everyone. I am Ishita, and my guest today is a craftsman of varied stories. He's the author of two thriller novels, Blood and Brown Sugar and Blood and Bombay Black, and a collection of macabre short stories, A Crate of Rags and Bones. His speculative fiction novella, Luna Hortus, has been released by Westland IF and appears in their latest collection, Between Worlds. His short stories collection, The Twelfth Night, was selected as a finalist in the Moonlit Gateway Short Fiction competition as the Banyan Tree Wept short story was shortlisted by the Indian Film Project, and the Peddler and the Crow won the Indian Writing Project Grand Prize. He's the co-founder of the online 400-member writing and critique group, the Ink and Quill Collective, where he serves as the senior fiction editor of their biannual magazine Quillmark, LA Nolan. Hi Lee, how are you?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me.
This has to be one of the longest bios that I've ever read out for any author.
Oh,
I'm amazed at the body of work that you have.
so,
Your journey is really intriguing. It's really inspiring. From what I've read, you shifted to India in 2012, right? 2012. So I feel that when I read Blood and Brown Sugar, was it inspired by that scenes, particularly when Alex lands in India and he's sifting through the traffic in in Delhi, and he's so mortified that, oh my God, really such a thing happens? Was
yeah,
it
very much so. Yeah, a lot of my initial experiences here in India are, directly related to what Alex sees and feels. Yeah, absolutely.
So, as an author, I felt that talking to people forms an integral part of our research. But did you have any other tricks up your sleeve to form these characters? And how did you prepare for writing about the Indian culture, the nuances of our cities, and the characters like especially Ramdev and the cops, which is, it's a different genre altogether. So, how did you prepare for that?
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, after I'd uh, emigrated to India, um, I'd consulted with a very close friend of mine who emigrated from Canada to Brazil. And, I said, how did you immerse yourself? How did you, you know, the first couple of months, of course, you feel like you're on vacation, and then after a while, real life sets in and,
Yeah.
you have to develop routines. You have to sort of form a circle of friends. And so that's what I did actually is I joined a motorcycle club, which, I've been riding bikes my entire life, and it was a very natural progression to me. Um, with that club, I formed some very close friendships, some very deep bonds. And I rode this country tip to tip, like Kanyakumari to Kashmir. And so that, I was immediately flooded with all these sounds and sensations and tastes and flavors. And, it was all this, amazing culture and new experiences that I was privy to. So that was the basis for the a lot of the cultural and sort of influences and things that are incorporated in the book. I can say that quite literally every kilometer that I write about in that book, I've ridden personally. So I did over 60,000 kilometers in 2 years. I mean, I've ridden this country completely. And of course, a lot of the characters were based very squarely on members of my club. Um, I'd rather not comment on my experiences with the NCB. Let's, let's call it research. I did some research to find out the inner workings of the NCB, and yeah, we'll leave it there.
It's true. Because they say that in India, maybe not really the language, but the tone and the dialect and the tradition changes every 100 kilometers. So it's, by the time you get used to one, there's a change if you're traveling. So yeah, 60,000 kilometers in 2 years you did a deep dive into the Indian culture.
Very,
That's
very
amazing.
much.
I haven't seen that much of India, I feel. And I've, yeah.
My wife is Indian, and she often complains that I've seen more of the country than she has.
I'm sure. There are so many parts of India that, the most of us wouldn't have completed. There is so much to see here. I feel authors have to overcome a lot of fear in order to write, a certain topic, especially the topic that you touched in many of your stories, like Don't Call Me Madeline, Blood and Brown Sugar. These are very sensitive topics. They require a very deep dive. So, did you ever face any doubts about writing on such a topic? How did you overcome that fear?
It's a funny profession, writing. In order for stories to really take root and to write something with depth and meaning that will resonate with readers, you have to, I mean, you're left with no option. You have to tap into these things. And they have to stir within you yourself. Stephen King once said that fiction is the truth within the lie. So if you're lying, readers will know. So you need to be passionate about these things that you're writing in order for it to bleed through. See, I come from a very old school. I'm very fond of the outlaw writers, Jack Kerouac, Hunter S. Thompson, the Gonzo journalism type, where you simply have to write without fear. Do I have these fears? Not while I'm writing, not while I'm drafting. After the release, yeah, sure, yeah, I do. Not just of how it'll be received, but have I brushed too closely against something? Have I perhaps offended someone or a group? In today's society, it's very easily done, and the repercussions, in North America at least, can be devastating. Here in India, they can be even worse. I mean, Salman Rushdie, for example, you know. Um, so those fears are there, but for the most part, I ignore them. And quite frankly, I rely on my editors very, very heavily to sort of say, "You sure you want to go there?" So, I mean, while I'm writing, no fear whatsoever, and I'll die under that flag. I write without fear. Um, during the editing phase, again, heavily influenced by perhaps beta readers or my editors, I might tweak or smoothen out some rough spots. But so to, I guess, directly answer you, yes, I have those fears. Do I pay attention to them? Not at all. I don't pay any attention.
That's very interesting. I mean, fear will always be there. We need to learn whether to listen to it or not. So, which was the toughest character for you to write?
To write,
Yeah.
um, in Blood and Brown Sugar?
Overall, maybe, you've written so variedly.
Yeah. Over,
Which one really, made you go out of your depth to write?
there's been a few that I struggled with for various reasons. I have a story called in When Goddesses Walk the Earth, and it was a publisher friend of mine sort of reached out to me to contribute to this anthology, and it was about Hindu goddesses with a very feminist slant, like way out of my wheelhouse, right? As I how can I possibly write, this story? But she challenged me. She said, I want you to dig into this and see what you can come up with. So I did, and I wrote about Usha, the goddess of dawn. That was tough. That was tough because I was not only was I sort of treading through mythology that I'm, obviously not familiar with, um, but writing from a sort of a female empowered perspective was something very new for me, and it was
Mhm.
very challenging. So that one was tough. I guess I pulled it off all right. It got some good reviews, and it seemed to be okay. And I suppose there was another character I'd written in a short story, and she brushes up against some things like drug addiction and isolation and battling with recovery that I found really poignant. Like it tugged at my own heartstrings quite a bit. She was tough to write. Um, and I guess in Blood and Brown Sugar, um, well, Alex was easy because it was all that information was there. Sandy, I guess, was the toughest. Um, I could relate to Sandy on some sort of emotional levels, but his motivations and sort of commitment to his you know, his career were something a little alien to me. So that was tough as well. I had to tread softly with Sandy and make sure I got the nuances of his character quite right.
Like you were mentioning, you have to be true to yourself, you're true to the reader, because the reader can grasp when you are not, when you are actually lying. So I think that really came through. It was, be it your research, be it, parts of your own life that contributed to creating such characters. I think it paid off very well. Well, if these were the characters, which story was it that really pushed your limits? Was there any story that you thought that, okay, I don't know how to craft the scenes, or you really that you really struggled with that to complete?
Oh, this is going to sound bad, but I wrote a romance once.
Oh, oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
Okay.
My heart, yeah, it's, in My Heart's Sunshine, I believe. I've forgotten the title now, if you can believe that. Um, but yeah, I was completely lost at sea with that one. It took a long time to complete that. I'd never really navigated the nuances of romance writing. I mean, it's so easily dismissed, romance. You know, people sort of smirk and, at least within the writers community and say, oh, you knock it out in 10 minutes, and you
Yeah.
can write a dozen romances in a month, sort of thing. It's not so easy. And I struggled a lot trying to find particularly the pacing. Um, I didn't want to fall into that instant love, sort of, you glance someone across the room at a party and you just know that they're the one for you. I didn't want to fall into that trope, so that I found the pacing very difficult. Um, it's a short story. You don't have a lot of time. You've got to move these things along, but you can't have people falling desperately in love in a matter of minutes. Uh,
True.
so yeah, it was tough. It was tough, and I said it in the time period in the late 1900s, or no, pardon me, mid 1800s. So the sort of the courting was different then. There were different parameters. So it was tough to navigate through how these two people actually fell in love. And, yeah, so that was difficult.
You know, I get that for writing romance. Initially, I always loved mysteries and thrillers as a reader. This is before I started writing, and I used to wonder that, okay, romance is not really my genre. I don't. I felt them very typical before I started reading romance. And I think young adult was the first genre that I started reading, and then I delved into romance. So when I was writing my first book, it was a pure mystery thriller. While editing the second draft, I happened to read Bridgerton series, and by the time I finished editing the second draft, it had turned into a romance mystery.
There you go.
And and I had gave it to a friend of mine to read, and I told him that this is a mystery with a touch of sci-fi in it. Before he finished it, he messaged me, "This is not a mystery. This is a romance mystery." I was like, you should be happy it did not turn into erotica, because I was reading so much of Julia Quinn and Colleen Hoover that time. So yeah, no, I think it's difficult to write romance, but I feel that. If the plot is something else, maybe if it's a mystery or a thriller, then you can include romance in the background, budding.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was horrified. I was reading a review, and typically I try not to read my reviews. But we're all curious to a certain extent. So,
But your
and I was
reviews
reading a
are
review about Blood and
yeah,
Brown Sugar, and they made mention of the poignant romance, the underlying poignant romance. I'm like, what? There's no romance in Blood and Brown. But there is. There's very much, and not just one. There's actually a couple. There is a very strong romantic thread
yeah,
throughout the novel, and I hadn't. It wasn't that I not paid attention to the plot line while writing. I very much paid attention to it, but I didn't pay attention to it as a romance. It just sort of developed on its own. So I think you're absolutely correct when you say, if you're set in a particular genre, it's very easy to sort of blend romance into the background and have
yeah.
it as a plot, a plot device.
How was it writing your first novel? How was that whole experience like? I mean, how tough was it?
The first one was a train wreck, to be honest. I I had no clue what I was doing. So I made all the mistakes, made some of them twice. I liked them so much. And it took, I think, 4 years, the better part of 4 years to write that novel, just the first draft. Um, so, it was a hideous experience. And I mean, I've been writing my entire life, since I was a child almost. I tried to write my own comic books at one point when I was, 11 or 12 years of age. But I'd never tackled a novel. It had always been short stories. I'd had some success back in the olden days, in the late 80s and early 90s. I had some success with university presses and things back in Canada, but it had always been short stories. Nothing wandering more, north of 5,000 words. So I had absolutely no idea what I was doing when I got into Blood. And so that it was tough. It was tough. And I mean not just from a craft perspective, but we were talking about genre. Even from genre, I had no idea what genre I was writing in. The craft perspective, like I said, was a mystery to me. I had no idea which viewpoint I was going to use. All of these things that don't translate well from short stories became real obstacles. And for the longest time, uh, the reason it took so long was quite often I just put it down. I'd get frustrated. I'd hit a brick wall, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. So I just let it cool, and then I'd go back to it. After I'd finally got it done, when it came to the editing phase, I decided, well, I need a little bit more direction. And I went about uh, sort of researching and taking a few courses on novel composition and, the long form writing, literary devices, and just to help me through the editing. But it vastly helped improve, my writing speed and sort of direction for the subsequent novels and short stories as well, to be honest. So it was, yeah, it was a tough go. It was tough sledding that first.
I think we all have not just one book, more than one book, lots of stories within us that just need a way to come out. And once you start writing, a few of us who really go at it are able to write so many stories and books. And looking at your journey, I hope I am able to write so many stories across genres. So that brings me to my next question. What is your process for writing across genres? I mean, what can an author do to write inspiring, engaging stories across different genres?
Pitfall that a lot of beginning writers or beginning authors find themselves in is, uh, first of all, it's where's my voice? How do I find my voice? How do I establish my voice? But second, I think is genre. What genre am I going to write in? And to be honest, I've never sweat it. I've never thought about genre. I mean, at all, zero. I mean, I'm labeled as a thriller writer because the bulk of my work has been set in a. Uh, but in my heart, I consider myself a horror writer. You know, uh, but the truth is that I don't pay a whole lot of attention to genre. The story's always first. Genre always ends up just being backdrop. And I think just due to my sort of macabre nature, I tend to, I lean into the darkness a little bit. I hide in the shadows. I like to play in the basements and the attics. And so, but it's not a conscious choice. It's just where my writing naturally leads me. I'm always focused on the story. That's first and foremost. And everything that comes after. Like, I'm a very character-driven writer. Yeah? And so wherever the character leads, I'll follow. And whether that be into a swamp or into a supermarket or a doctor's office or a spaceship or a pirate ship, wherever it goes, I'll follow. And I think once I've cracked sort of the first for a short story, say 500 words, I've got a good feel for where we are and what's happening, and then I'll lean a little bit more into genre. I'll say, okay, this is getting really dark, and I can lean into the horror writing tropes, or this is a little more sinister, so I'll lean more into the thriller tropes, and um, but I don't stress it when I'm starting out. I focus on the story. It's always about the story. It's always about the characters. And then I let them paint the backdrop for me. Once that's established, sure, I'll fill in the blanks, I'll paint by numbers kind of thing. But I never want to be married to one particular genre. I just want to tell stories, and if people label me as this kind of writer or that kind of writer, that's fine. I have no issue with that. But I don't think I'd ever come out and put my stamp on myself as any particular genre.